They told me a black boy had two choices in Mississippi: stay quiet and live in chains, or speak up and get buried. I remember the night I found out they weren't lying. I was born on a porch in Charleston, Mississippi, with cicadas singing my name. My mama said I came out crying so loud the midwife jumped back. She laughed about it later, said I always had a big voice. Funny thing about having a big voice in Mississippi in the 1940s? It's only cute when you're a baby. Once you're old enough to talk back, folks want you quiet. My earliest memory is of my daddy getting fired for talking too much. He worked at a garage fixing up old Fords. I remember his hands were always black with oil. He used to scrub them with lye soap until they bled. One day a white customer spit on the floor and called him boy. My daddy didn't bow, didn't say, "Yes, sir." He just looked the man in the eye. That was enough. He came home that night with nothing but his toolbox. Mama didn't cry in front of us kids, but I heard her through the walls. We learned early. Don't look them in the eye too long. Don't sound too smart. Don't run your mouth. But I was a stubborn child. We went to a one-room schoolhouse for black children at the edge of town. The paint was peeling, the roof leaked when it rained, and the books were second-hand with pages missing. I loved those books anyway. I remember Mrs. Thompson, our teacher, telling us, "They can keep us out of their schools, but they can't keep knowledge out of your head." She taught us poetry, mathematics, history, black history too. She was a rebel in her own way, but learning was dangerous. I was 10 when they caught my older cousin Isaiah teaching a few of us after hours. They found us huddled under a kerosene lamp reading Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. The next day, they beat Isaiah so bad he couldn't walk. The sheriff called it a lesson. I was 15 when they burned our church. It was summer, so hot the air felt like soup. We were in the middle of service when the smell hit. Smoke. Reverend Carter told everyone to stay calm, but panic doesn't listen to a preacher. We ran out into the night to see flames pouring through the roof. I remember the way the fire cracked and roared like an angry animal. Someone had chained the doors shut from outside. If we hadn't smelled it early, we'd all have died. They never caught anyone. Of course they didn't. Sheriff Harlan himself told my daddy, "Be grateful y'all got out." The first time I saw a man die was 1954. I was standing on the sidewalk when Mr. Benny Johnson, who ran the barbershop, got dragged out into the street. White men accused him of insulting a white woman because he refused to give up his place in line at the post office. They beat him in broad daylight. I remember the blood on the pavement. I remember his eyes, glassy and unseeing. Nobody helped, not even the colored folks. We were too scared. That night, my mama scrubbed my shirt clean because his blood had splattered on it. She didn't say a word the whole time. The first time I saw a man die was 1954. I was standing on the sidewalk when Mr. Benny Johnson, who ran the barbershop, got dragged out into the street. White men accused him of insulting a white woman because he refused to give up his place in line at the post office. They beat him in broad daylight. I remember the blood on the pavement. I remember his eyes, glassy and unseeing. Nobody helped, not even the colored folks. We were too scared. That night, my mama scrubbed my shirt clean because his blood had splattered on it. She didn't say a word the whole time. When I was 17, I told my mama I was leaving Mississippi. She didn't try to stop me. She just held my face in her hands and said, "Don't forget who you are. Don't forget what they did here." I caught the bus north. It was supposed to be freedom. But racism doesn't stop at the border. In Memphis, they called me boy, too. In Chicago, the landlord told me there were no vacancies the second he saw my face. I worked in a factory where they paid me half what they paid the white boys. But I was alive. That counted for something. Chicago wasn't the promised land they said it'd be. When I stepped off that Greyhound, I expected something different. Tall buildings, big dreams. But the South Side was crumbling. Rats in the alleys, drunks on the corners, cops who treated us like the enemy. They said, "Up north, you can be anything." But the factories had color lines, too. I worked at the stockyards at first. The smell of blood and shit hung in your nose all day. The foreman liked to call us darkies for fun. I learned to keep my mouth shut. There was no NAACP rep on the killing floor. I got a tiny room in a boarding house run by Mrs. Jenkins, a woman tough as nails. She said, "Baby, you're safe here, but don't you bring any trouble." Trouble meant cops. Trouble meant white men who felt like they still owned us. Even here, I wasn't much for politics. I just wanted a steady paycheck. But one summer, the union tried to strike. They were fighting for equal pay for black workers. I didn't want to picket. I was scared. But the day they came for one of our best men, Earl Washington, they fired him for organizing. I watched him crying while he packed up his locker. That did something to me. I marched that day. Didn't even last an hour before the cops came. They broke heads first, asked questions later. I still got the scar on my eyebrow. They booked me for disorderly conduct. When they let me out, they handed me my jacket and said, "Don't try that freedom shit again." I met Angela at a church revival. She had a voice like honey, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't trust easy. "Men talk big about freedom," she said, "but they can't even look me in the eye when they say, 'I love you.'" I tried to prove her wrong. We got married in 1958 in a tiny basement church. No fancy suit, no flowers, just us and a preacher who mumbled the vows. We built something anyway. We rented a cramped flat with roaches that scattered when you turned on the light. But she made it a home. She made me believe it was worth fighting for. But I was scared every day. Scared the wrong look at a white cop would get me killed. Scared the landlord would toss us out for being loud if our baby cried. Scared I'd get fired for asking for a raise. I used to lie awake and listen for sirens, because sometimes they meant someone like me wasn't coming home. By 1960, the city was boiling. They raised bus fares, but only in the black neighborhoods. Angela was pregnant. She used to ride that bus to her sewing job. I remember her standing in the kitchen with tears in her eyes. They want me to choose between buying milk for our baby or paying that damn fare. That broke something in me. We joined the boycott. We walked miles. Old folks limped along, refusing to pay. We set up carpools, church vans. We held meetings in basements, and the city noticed. They sent cops to break up the crowds, arrested pastors, beat teenagers, called us agitators, all for wanting to ride the bus for the same price as white folks. I was never meant to be a leader. I didn't want speeches or headlines. I just wanted my child to grow up safe. But when they knocked on my door one night, 2 white cops with billy clubs tapping in their hands, Angela stood behind me shaking. They told me I was a known agitator. They said I'd better stop marching, or accidents happen. I remember my heart pounding so hard, I thought I'd faint. But I didn't back down. "Then you'd better kill me now," I said. They just smiled. Plenty of time for that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside and sat on the steps looking at the stars, thinking about my daddy back in Mississippi, thinking about Isaiah getting whipped for reading, thinking about Benny dying in the street. And I realized I couldn't stop, even if it killed me. They tried to break us. They raised rents, closed schools, sent cops in riot gear to our prayer circles. They beat our children in the streets, then called us animals for wanting justice. But we didn't stop. I remember one summer evening when they burned a cross on the corner. I stood there with Angela, our little girl, clinging to my leg. The flames danced in the dark, crackling like a promise of death. And I felt that old fear rise up in me, but I didn't run. Neighbors poured out onto porches. Some shouted, some prayed, and someone started singing. Low at first, then louder. "We shall overcome." It wasn't just a song. It was a dare, a prophecy. I'm an old man now. My hands don't work so well. My back aches. But I remember everything. I remember Earl crying in that factory. I remember the blood in the streets. I remember my baby girl learning to read, her little brown fingers trailing under every word. And I remember telling her, "No one can ever make you less than human, unless you let them." They used to call us troublemakers. Now they call us history. But I'm here to tell you, history isn't over. Racism didn't disappear because we sang a few songs. It changed its clothes. It learned to smile for the cameras. But it's still here. waiting for us to get tired. But we don't get tired. We teach, we vote, we march, we tell the truth, even when they don't want to hear it, especially then, because my story ain't special. It's just true. And if you're listening, if you're hearing my voice even now, it's because you know deep down it's your fight too. So promise me something. When they tell you to shut up, to sit down, to forget, you remember? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe so we can keep sharing the truth. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own family's story. And please like this video to help spread these voices that were meant to be silenced, because stories like mine deserve to be heard. And together, maybe we really can overcome.